Hello everyone, welcome to the machine learning course. Please get ready. We are about to officially start our class, and I hope you all can gain something.
Welcome back to our machine learning class. Today, we're moving on to K-means clustering algorithms. In this class, we introduce you what is K-means and how K-means algorithm calculates. K-means is a distance-based clustering algorithm that uses distance as evaluation index of similarity. It involves efficiencies by specifying the number of clustering in advance. Therefore, hierarchical clustering can produce a series of cluster solutions for different cluster numbers, while fast clustering can only produce a single cluster solution. Here, we look at the example. How to put the points A, B to I, and what about H and J? Which categories should they be divided into? According to the principles of K-means algorithms, the first step is to determine the number of clusters, denoted as K. In this case, let's choose K equals 2. Next, we randomly selected samples to serve as the initial cluster centers. Moving on to the second step, we compare the distance between all other points and the two chosen cluster centers. Points with shorter distance are assigned to the cluster represented by the corresponding cluster center. Here, let's say the cluster center A represents one cluster, and the remaining points from the other clusters. In the third step, we define new cluster center within new clusters. These new cluster centers are represented by the mean coordinates of all points within the respective clusters. Then, in the fourth step, we repeat the process from the second step. We calculate and compare the distance between other points and the cluster centers, and then reassign the point to their corresponding clusters. And this time, let's say that the cluster ABCDE forms one cluster, while cluster FGHIJ forms the other. In the fifth step, as you can see, we repeat the process from the third step, which involves recalculating the new cluster centers. Next, we once again calculate and compare the distance between each point and new cluster centers. We then reassign the point to their respective clusters. In this step, we observe that the cluster centers has not changed. As a result, the iteration process comes to a stop. Finally, we output the two obtained cluster centers, which serve as the results of the algorithm's computation. Here, we can observe that ABCDE forms one group, while FGHIJ form another group. Now, let's summarize the steps of the K-means algorithm. First, K-means algorithm decide on the number of the clusters, which will be denoted as K. Second, we select K samples from the dataset as the initial cluster centers. Then, we assign each samples to the cluster whose center is closer to it, based on the principles of minimum distance. And next, we calculate the new cluster centers by taking the mean of each variables for all samples assigned to each cluster. Finally, we repeat the step 3 and the step 4 until the specified number of iterations is reached or the termination condition is met. By default, the maximum number of iterations is set to 10, and the termination conditions by default is with the max mean change in any cluster center's position is less than 2%. So, in this lesson, we provided a brief introduction to the computation process of K-means. This primarily includes seeding initial cluster centers. the iterative process, and the termination traditions, and 3 crucial aspects. We hope that you now have a basic understanding of this K-mean algorithm. We'll see you again in the next class.